Hi, and welcome to RBP on JSB. I'm violinist Rachel Barton Pine, and today we're going to be discussing the sixth and final movement of Bach's Partita No. 3 in E major, the Gigue. And indeed, this is the final movement of the entire Six Sonatas and Partitas. If you want to hear a discussion about some of the general issues that pertain to all of Bach's solo violin works, please be sure to check out the overview episode. So this is, I think, the shortest movement of all of the sonatas and partitas. If you don't play it with repeats, it takes under a minute of time. It's absolutely miniature, and it's very interesting that Bach ended his entire cycle not with a big blowout or a grand gesture, but just with this cute little Gigue that kind of, smiles and waves as it makes its light-hearted exit. Think about how the end sounds. And if you try to superimpose something more strong on top of it, it really doesn't fit the character of the music. That's just not the feel that the rest of the movement has, and it seems a bit artificial, even though it's certainly very tempting to do that. But just keep elegant, stay French, and you'll have it just right. So, it's interesting, the D minor Gigue from the second partita is still a Gigue, but it's much more strong. But here, our little E major Gigue, our French Gigue, is just cute. Isn't that just... You just want to take that Gigue and give it a hug. So actually, when you think about it, the Gigue is the only of the Baroque dances from 1720 used in Bach's cycle that we still dance today. Nobody ever gets together in sarabands. Nobody ever gets together in minuets unless, some country dances still have minuets, but like jigues, everybody does the Gigue. That's like kind of normal. And in terms of playing, there are all kinds of styles that have jigues. If you think of a Scottish Gigue, it's actually a little bit dotted. And an Irish Gigue, actually I'm sure I know a few, but I don't normally play Irish music, so I'll just play that same Scottish Gigue as if it's an Irish Gigue, which means I'm going to play it fast and even. Actually, I think not, whatever it is. Anyway, that's the river dance version. So, there's lots of different kinds of jigues, and the French one was elegant and light and had lots of air. So make sure that you don't think, I know how to play a Gigue because I did the one in the D minor partita. I'm going to do the same thing here. Because that's making it much more bold than it actually is. So the rhythmic pattern here, the da-da-dum-bum, ba-da-dum-bum, each of those is a gesture, and the up bows are just a reaction to the down bows. They're not a separate impetus. Think about bouncing a ball onto the floor. When it rises back up from the floor, that seems like an opposite action, but it's not a separate action with a separate motion to cause that action into being. It's just a reaction to the first action. So the bouncing down and up is a pair of actions that belong together. And the same thing with your down bow and up bow here. So it's not with that second eighth being its own thing. And so whenever you have that in measure 8, now if we do our 6-note slur, we're on an up bow, so you can still do your and then down bow here. Or you could put a slur, add a slur before the big slur to get back to a down bow for 13. So let's see what we could do. Maybe here. But really it's not necessary. You can fake it without doing... You have to just work extra hard to give that same kind of feel of a gesture. The second time it happens, we actually could get back to down if we wanted. We could, because if we take another down bow to make those 16ths feel, so we take another down bow here in measure 26, then we're still on an up bow, but we could do it as it comes and not take another down bow in 26, and then we're backwards for a while, but at least we haven't added a slur that Bach didn't write. So, and that actually works well and feels really good in 28 to come out on a down bow, and feels pretty good in 27 to do the slur on an up bow. But then you got all that backwards stuff. The other option with the down bow here, they both work, and it's just up to you which way you feel like doing it, which one feels ergonomically more comfortable. And as a famous violinist once said, it's not which bowings you do, but how you do the bowings, meaning how it sounds is the only thing that matters, and not whether it happens to be down bow or up bow. So now, speaking of bowings, measure 17, the first measure of the second half, there's no slur. And our little jig rhythm here, well, that one had a slur. So we feel like we want to slur, but then we'd have to take another down. So if you just have to make that a slur because you really want to hear a slur there, I can certainly forgive you. I mean, that's totally understandable and nothing wrong with it. But Bach, of course, did not write a slur. And so if you do it unslurred, you still want to make sure those two notes feel like they belong together, not... I mean, I guess you could argue that maybe because they aren't slurred, that they should really be different than a slurred version and be really separate. But then that sounds too equal, and equal was not a thing in the Baroque. It was always certain things being more important, certain things being less important. And so, dum ba dun da 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 da, you wouldn't go dun 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 if you were singing it, right? That doesn't make sense. So, still make an elegant gesture. Speaking of elegant gestures, we already talked a little bit about the last measure, but it does end up backwards. Or I guess, well, this ends up backwards. That's your real last note, and then this is your tag. So it's kind of backwards not to go and do that, but you can make it work. Just make sure you use a lot of bow here and very little bow over here. Those are two of your cadences. There's actually another cadence within the B section, within the second half, and that, of course, is measure 23, where we have a brief, side trip into minor key. So it actually, well, it's maybe a little more than brief. It kind of starts in measure 19. Then, or maybe at measure 18, really. Make sure you show these little slurs. And then not da da da, but da 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 dum bum. That's one phrase. Or it would actually be backwards from that, starting down bow. And then a pickup to the... And here we have a bit of a dialogue. One voice, the other voice, one voice, the other voice. So make sure that that doesn't just sound linear. Not nearly as interesting. So... Yeah, so then we have a cadence in A major after all that minor key stuff. And then you can take a little bit of time before continuing on. And then we do have two voice stuff here. One voice, the other guy. One voice, the other guy. And then that guy gets the last word. So really bring out that dialogue. And of course the same thing starting at measure 13. So those are some of my thoughts about the E major Gigue. I'm Rachel Barton Pine, and thank you for watching RBP on JSB.